So today I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Guéguen. This year, 2025, marks 50 years of your lobbying career, yet you strike me as somebody who wants to look forward rather than looking back. Is it this tension between what people see as the need to enlarge the EU on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to deepen the single market and create the European citizenry and create a more federal Europe? It's the tension between these two objectives that makes the institutions dysfunctional.
Yes, the situation is the one you describe. I think there is a clear need for Ukraine and the Balkanic countries to be part of the EU somewhere, but not as full members. I think we can imagine an agreement for associations. I can imagine also that a country like Ukraine could be fully part of a policy like the Common Agricultural Policy, but not full members. Otherwise, the system already blocked today will be fully blocked for the future. And this is impossible because, again, we have a single currency, as you mentioned, and a single currency is a federal tool. A federal tool means that the single currency requires deepening and require a system where you have an harmonization between the economy of the different member states. And the more you enlarge, the more you will have economic divergences, and the more the system potentially will be on threat.
The impression that I got from reading some of your articles is that you are anti-enlargement and that you think that the EU would be better if we just focused on the group that we had before the enlargement in the early 2000s. But surely Europe is better with Poland as part of the EU, Slovakia as part of the EU, and so on.
The problem was, I think, a big mistake to try to combine a single currency with an enlargement of the Union. And now we have to manage the situation like it is, and we see already tensions. I am French. You can see the situation in France with the big increase of the interest rate, putting a big pressure on the French debt. So you see, this is the beginning of the story, and potentially I am very pessimistic.
Do you think that industry groups have failed in their mission of representing European industry in Brussels?
Well, you have obviously some industry groups which are working well and we perform in lobbying. So, but in global terms, in general terms, I think that the performance of the civil society, the NGOs, is far better than the performance of EU trade association and industries in general. Why?
Well, I want to come back with that, but I just want to make the link between some of the developments that have taken place at EU level, because you write a lot about the Lisbon Treaty, which you don't like.
No.
Now, have the developments that have followed from the Lisbon Treaty, which seems to be an increased bureaucratization of the lawmaking process, you're saying that has had an impact on lobbyists?
Yes, a lot.
It has also turned them into bureaucrats.
Well, what was the situation? Not only when I started in lobbying in 1975, 50 years ago, but even in the 2000s. What was a lobbyist? A lobbyist was someone having a specialization in something. A lobbyist needs to be specialized. Identifying the key actors, mostly at commission level, and meeting them. I have never had, during the first 35 years of my career, any procedural problem, any procedural questioning. Now you are in a system in which everything is complex. You need still to be, of course, a technician of something, but you have to have a clear understanding of the decision-making processes, and very few lobbyists are specialized to this extent. And on top, you need to be able to build a real position, not to have a lowest common denominator, so a strong position, a credible position. And finally, you need to have the capacity to communicate this position to the external world and to the institutions. In other terms, technicality, legal understanding, and the capacity to communicate. So now lobbying is much more complex than it was before.
Can we get into that a bit more? I'm just interested in the contrast that you make between pre and post Lisbon, and you talk about this rugby ball model and sandpiper model. Can you use that to explain how the lawmaking process has changed?
Well, the rugby ball and the sandtimer are part of one of my books, Reshaping European Lobbying. Well, the rugby ball, the central part is the legislation. The top part is the drafting. And the bottom part is execution measures, comitology, But the big part is legislation, and this is fair. We have generally 2 readings. The committees in Brussels, plenary session in Strasbourg. Okay, that works. Globally transparent, more or less transparent. Now, due to the Lisbon Treaty, but essentially to the trilogues, and no full mechanism, totally anti-democratic in my opinion. The legislation are only guidelines. So it's a big reduction of the legislative part and a big development, a big push for what I call secondary legislation, delegated act and implementing act. You have, for the acquis communautaire, the yearly acquis communautaire, 98%, 98% of the acquis communautaire is based on delegated act and implementing act, which are total black box. And you have not in Brussels 10, perhaps 10, no, not 20 EU public affairs professionals, really experts in comitology and delegated acts.
But you had comitology pre-Lisbon. I mean, how did comitology change to become so obscure and opaque?
But the comitology pre-Lisbon was something which was, first of all, very well understood by the lobbyists, and in particular in agriculture. I spent a big part of my career in agriculture. So you have the famous management committees. And when I was the Secretary General of Copa-Cogeca or the head of the European Sugar Lobby, I was working a lot with the institution in or for these management committees. It was a real dialogue between the Commission, the Member States, and the professionals. And the system was simple. It was unified. You have no exceptions and derogation. The system was basic, simple, a bit bureaucratic, but far less than now.
Yeah. So comitology has, on the one hand, become more important in terms of its influence because more of the work is done in delegated and implementing acts, but it's also become more opaque and difficult to manage and difficult to lobby.
In the past, comitology was also very important, in particular for agriculture.
Right.
The problem now is, in fact, you have 2 levels. You have the delegated act, which are strategic measures. Yep. Well, first, is it normal that key issues for energy, for instance, key issues could be decided by the Commission via delegated acts? I think not. And for implementing acts, you have so many implementing acts per year for authorizations of medicine, many things. So this is a universe, it's incredible.
How is it that the member states allowed their power, let's say the power of the Council of the European Union, to be undermined so dramatically in this way?
This is a mystery.
They didn't see it coming. They didn't read the treaty. They didn't understand its implications.
The one who signs the treaty don't read it. Yes, I don't see any other consideration because then after December 2009, when the Lisbon Treaty was implemented, including myself, we discover because delegated acts are based on Article 290 of the treaty. I have read this article many times. But the text was not saying anything. But then after I have asked questions, I have met people and I have discovered, but all the member states were not informed. It's absolutely amazing. And this system, again, is very, very anti-democratic because the Commission has a monopoly of initiative, including for delegated act, and the capacity for delegated act to adopt. Yeah. Then after you have a possibility for the member states and the parliament to veto, but you need a very high majorities, and it's very, very, very difficult. So the system has totally evolved in the direction of more power for the Commission. And I think, honestly speaking, I am a pro-European, there is no doubt about that, but the Commission has too much powers.
So I said in the beginning that you're somebody who's looking forward, but is really what you're saying that we need to go back to the good old days of the rugby ball model where most of the work on legislation was more open and transparent?
Well, we have to go back to the good old days, yes, but you have to make a difference between the treaties, the way that the system is working, legally speaking, procedurally speaking, in which more or less we can do nothing. It is possible to have a hope to see an improvement of better regulation because it is not in the treaty, it's an interinstitutional agreement. This is why here I'm more optimistic. But I think we have to go back to the good old days for lobbying. Again, I am fed up of this bureaucrat lobbyist or lobbyist bureaucrats. What is a good lobbyist? First of all, a good lobbyist has a network. You have a network. You have a network in the commission, in the institution, at the parliament, in the member state. You know who is who. And you cultivate your network. Every day I spend 1 hour or 2 to cultivate my network, to meet people, to lunch with people, to have relations with them. And this is absolutely fundamental. I am fed up of Teams and Zooms and WebEx and all this stuff, You have to meet people. And this is the secret. We have to go back to that and also to have the capacity to communicate properly, to have pedagogy, to write short and clear documents translated in 21 languages and not this awful English from the Brussels bubble, which is the common way to people to write, too long, too technical, boring.
So even if we don't succeed in reforming the EU to go back to the good old days of more transparent lawmaking, there's still a lot that can be done on the industry side for industry to get better, because I don't think that there's anything that you say about NGOs that couldn't be adopted by industry bodies. There's nothing stopping them.
I totally agree with you. And in particular, anticipation. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but what is the best way to be informed? It's not to have a contract with Politico Pro. No, the best way is to meet people. You have to meet the one who are responsible of the topic.
But I'm trying to figure out, what recommendation are you actually trying to make? Because you're emphasizing the importance of this personal approach to lobbying, and I think you say in the introduction that we should go back to that. But at the same time, you're complimenting the NGOs for their ability to communicate and do well with social media. So are you saying a personal approach plus a more industrial approach on social media?
But this kills me, when I see the inefficiency of many industry lobbyists. And it's amazing to see how they take never time to think. They are running everywhere. They are spending time in meetings and conferences and seminars and everything. Me, never. It's exceptionally rare when I participate to a conference or to a seminar, except if I am invited as a speaker. I spend a lot of time to think, I spend a lot of time to meet, and I spend a lot of time to write. I like to be with a small team of people in which I have trust and mutual trust. And I think that the more I have to work on a complex lobbying case, the more I am calm. And the more I am 100% involved in the dossier from the moment I wake up to the moment where I go to sleep. But with calm, I think this is, again, I am very old school to that extent. But this way to work is extremely pleasant. I think I have been very lucky in all my career and even now. It's a pleasure for me to work because, again, I don't pretend that my way to work is the only one. No, again, the personal factor is key, and you can have, of course, different personalities. But the way to work with a specific vision, to take time, to think, to work with the other. A lobbyist is necessarily someone liking people. You need to like people if you are a lobbyist. You need to like to meet people. You need to like to exchange with people, to lunch with people, to travel with people. This is fundamentally important. Also, because you were speaking about my predecessor. My predecessor was a man of culture. He was someone with a French culture, in love with operas and exhibitions and art. Me too, honestly speaking now. Art is a big dimension in my life. But because I reject the idea to be a bureaucrat, I can tell you that in the artistic part of my life, which is very important because I am an art collector and I work with museum and I publish in art, is also very important in my lobbying life.
How?
Because, again, you create interest to your interlocutor. I mean, for me, one of the worst possible experience when I invite someone for a lunch is to meet a person speaking 100% of the lunch on his dossier. This is absolutely boring. I think the sugar people teach me how to lunch. A lunch is like an opera. You have a beginning and an end, and you have to sing where you invite, how do you organize the discussion, what is the strategy behind, and to make your guests comfortable and pleased to be there. Again, all that is based on preparation. Never standardization. Standardization is the extreme enemy of an efficient lobbying. Case by case. Tailor-made approach. This is the secret.
What you describe is an extremely attractive profession.
Yes, it is.
I think that many people in Brussels would love to have this type of a job.
Yes, but they can.
We all get swallowed up in the system. We all get swallowed up with impact assessments. We all get swallowed up in the routine.
I hate the routine first. There is absolutely no doubt. No, but
you said you're pessimistic, but you're giving us hope.
No. But the problem is that people are too shy. You speak about the impact assessment. When you work on an impact assessment, again, you have to be upstream. You have to meet the commission before. You have to know who is the subcontractor, what are the questions which will be raised, who are the interlocutors selected, all that. If you don't know that, you are not a lobbyist. But if you know that and you do nothing, you are not a lobbyist either. You are a spectator. But generally, you disagree. But if you disagree, you have to be vocal. Yeah. Or I am very surprised to see how these people, they are very shy and they don't dare to say something against this or against that or against the commission. I think in this job, you have not to be shy, If you want to oppose yourself, you have to do it and not to be afraid. And the commission appreciate people having a personal position on the dossiers. Me, I accept the fact to be considered as somewhat disruptive. I'm a pro-European, very critical, but I am not blacklisted as a commission. I have managed very big dossiers in full opposition with the commission, in particular for trade negotiations in the past, but also for some dossiers like the Orfacol saga, but I am not blacklisted. I don't ask people to following me in my analysis. We can disagree. But it's so fundamentally important to put ourselves in the capacity to exchange, to dialogue, to build consensus,
I think that what you're saying is that we missed a step in lobbying. And the foundational part of it is to develop character.
Yes.
To cultivate yourself.
Yes.
To be somebody interesting and to be able to build meaningful relationships with other people.
Yes.
This doesn't get taught in public affairs schools. Right?
No.
Okay. But maybe that's the first step. But I'm just going to, I'll let you come in, but that's the first step. Once you have that, and then you can develop a leadership position. You can be a leader. And once you have that, then you have the capacity to disagree with people. Because you already have strong relationships with them, so they will accept that. People have missed that step. And so what's happening is, in order to try and build relationships, they think, I just need to pretend that I agree with them.
Yeah.
I just need to follow what they're saying. And then they look like complete sheep, not the type of person at all that you would like to go to lunch with.
I have resigned from Copa Cogeca, of which Copa Cogeca is the most important lobby in Europe for farmers' union and farm cooperatives. I have resigned from Copa Cogeca in February 1996, due to the fact I have discovered big mismanagement on public subsidies, between parentheses. And the day after, I decided to become a consultant.
Yep.
The day after. We moved from one situation to another one immediately.
This sounds like a bit like coming down in the world.
Yeah. And I have discovered myself an entrepreneur. So I have created a team and I have started. And all my life after, I have recruited trainees. To work with me, you have to start as a trainee. And what I was saying to my trainees when they were arriving to my office for the first time, I was saying to them, okay, you have graduate and you have diplomas for this or that top universities, but forget what you know. I will teach you real life. And the real life is what you say. Again, lobbying is fascinating because it's a mix of many things. Again, the personal culture, the capacity to speak of something outside your dossier, the curiosity, again, the capacity to take from your interlocutor interesting point. It's not cynical, This is not cynical at all. But you build credibility, and this is a job which is based on responsibility. When I was representing COPA or the Farmers Union, and when I was presenting a position paper to a civil servant, systematically, I had 3 questions. The first question was, Mr. Guéguen, it's interesting. I read your document, but some paragraphs are unclear. Can you explain why? Yes, it's unclear because, it was disagreement and we have had obliged to twist a little bit the sentences to try to say something. Yes, I understand. The second question was, but what are the margins of progression in the dossier? Which country can move and what is the position of this versus that? So you have to explain. And the third question was ever the same. The third question was, and you yourself, Mr. Guéguen, what is your position regarding the dossier? Well, you can say my position is the position of my association. I can do nothing else and say nothing more. But if you do that, you're not a lobbyist. You have to say, me personally, I believe that the appropriate way is this and this. And the big difference between the previous period and now is because when you were at that time the Director General of an EU trade association, you have much more autonomy that they have now. But autonomy, you can gain economy. Me personally, I consider that when you are the Secretary General or the Director General of an EU trade association, you are not the boss because you have a president and you have members, but you are in an executive role and you have to assume this role. Never, never, never I have asked my members when I was interviews. I was considering that to be interviews was part of the job. I have never asked my president to read a paper that I have prepared for a newspaper. Never. I was considering that this was part of my job. And now you see how, in general, the Secretary General or directors of EU Trade Association are very much under control. Financially, they have to ask the authorization for anything. They have to be very careful. They have to be very cautious. And this, I think, is very negative because when you are the head of an EU trade association, you are a boss, you are a leader. And if you are not a leader, you are not efficient.
Is there a lack of talent? Do we not have enough leaders coming through?
No, I think that we are in a world in which there is a lot of talent, but you have to find them. But to find them, you have to search them.
Yeah. Maybe talented people often don't consider being a lobbyist as a profession.
Yes, I can understand that personally, but I think in general terms, if you wish, the lack of leadership that I have mentioned, and you also several times, is general. And we see that in the global society due to many factors. Also, the fact that the culture is decreasing, people read less, they read less newspapers. The journalists also have less capacity to really comment, to analyze. There are more reporters than analysts. Because in lobbying, again, you have to be an analyst. You have to analyze. You are pro or against, and you have to find your arguments. And because, in fact, we are in a world which is politically correct, and more. And I'm very, very anxious regarding the evolution. Because I see the EU personally in a very bad shape. I think the year 2025 will be extremely negative for the EU. Personally, I'm not a great fan of Madame von der Leyen. I thought and I think that it was a big mistake to reappoint her for a second term. I think that the first 5 years of Madame von der Leyen were lost. And we have, first of all, the problems inside the EU, divergences between the member states, economic problematics, divergence, blah, 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 blah. We see at the border the different conflicts, in particular with Ukraine, the problematic of enlargement, and we see more generally the emergence of new powers.
Daniel Guéguen, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.